All right, I wanted to take some time today to tell you a bit about what ORCID's all about, so here I am with my handy-dandy headphone. ORCID stands for Online Researcher and Contributor Identifier, and what I'm going to do today is talk a bit about what ORCID is all about, how it's being used around the world, including some specific information about how it's being used in African countries. And also provide some information about uptake and adoption by the community, and also how ORCID is being used in specific sectors of the research community. So what are publishers and funders and universities and repositories doing with ORCID? I'm going to skip over some of the slides I have in here on APIs. If somebody is interested in going into the technical details of this a bit further, we can entertain that in the question and answer session of this. All right, so thank you very much. Let's quick slides here. So the second slide, there's a bit of a lag here. Okay, there we go. So the big reason that ORCID is around has to do with name ambiguity. A lot of people think of folks with common names like Dave Jackson that we see here on the slide, or Sumit Gupta, who, when people look for him in PubMed by searching for his name, find over 10,000 results and have a really hard time figuring out what belongs to the Sumit Gupta that they are interested in. This all comes back to how we understand and search and information. And when we're interested in discovering information about a person, right now the tools that we have, or the tools that people have generally used, involve searching using a name string. So as we move into the digital information age, we need to think about what is it that computers can understand when we enact a search. And name strings are great when you're interacting with someone in person, but they're very, very difficult for computers to understand. When you have people like Julie Banfield, who gets married and changes her name, how do we connect her existing research with that research she publishes under her new name? How do we connect Ted Hart's various different ways that he's published under E. Hart and E. M. Hart? All of these are him. How does a computer know that's the same person? We have the Jens Age Schmerp Sorensens of the world, who have 4 different names. Which one's his last name? Which version of this should we be searching for? And how do we handle characters, special character sets? Very, very difficult for computers. So ORCID is around to help us deal with these issues, and I'll talk a bit more about how we do that. So on the next slide, we show a specific issue of one particular researcher that I got in from a while back. And in their email signature, they had all of these things. They had profiles on academia, on Mendeley, on ResearchGate, on WorldCat. Oh my heavens. And then they also had identifiers. So the reason I have this slide up is to say, you know, one of the ways that people are trying to handle machine readability is by creating a number of different profiles in a number of different systems so that they're out there. But what that means is they also now need to keep all of those profiles updated. And from talking to researchers, they're very, very tired. They don't want to have to manage all of these different profiles independently. There are also different identifiers. So these numeric strings that identify a researcher in addition to their name. And there's different ways that these identifiers have been used. So we have things like Scopus, which uses machine algorithms to assign identifiers to authors in their databases. We have Researcher ID, which is a researcher-initiated project that was sponsored by Thomson Reuters and the Web of Science, where individuals had to come sign up and then link to publications in the Web of Science. We have ISNI, that provides an identifier that is assigned through a library authority process after publication, generally manages things like books, but also has a much wider purview, including rights management in music and other things. And we also have ORCID, which provides, well, we'll talk a bit more about ORCID, but again, my point here is to show that there are 2 categories of things that researchers can interact with. There are the profile systems, which is here I am, here's my picture, here's all my work. And there are the identifiers, which are these numeric strings. So I'll talk a bit more about what that means. So what ORCID does is it provides a registry where individuals can obtain for free a unique identifier for themselves that they can then use when they submit a grant, when they submit a data set, when they submit a paper, to associate with other person identifiers like the ISNI, SCOPUS, and researcher IDs of the world, and also to associate with their professional identity, for example, their association member ID or the abstract that they have submitted to a meeting. So ORCID is this identifier, a registry system. It is a database field. And all of these sectors, all components of the research community are integrating this identifier into their databases so that when, for example, a publisher goes through the submission process, they are asking authors for their ORCID identifier, and that identifier then becomes a part of the metadata of that paper, and that is then submitted to Crossref. And then as Web of Science, as Scopus, as anybody else indexes these papers, they are indexing not just the title and list of authors, etc. They are also including the identifier. So you can search not just ORCID for this information, you can search any of those other databases and be able to search the person's name, but also the idea. It becomes much, much easier to find, to discover people, but it also becomes possible for repositories, for example, to use this identifier to search, for example, Crossref or DataCite, or ORCID for that matter, and pull information into those repositories to update them on a regular basis. Instead of having to ask your researchers to send you their latest paper, you can use these APIs, these machine processes, to keep things updated. It saves everyone a lot of time, and it also improves data quality, and it improves the accuracy and completeness of the information you have. Okay, so what are persistent identifiers? I've mentioned a bit about it. They are alphanumeric persistent informations, and they are resolvable. So this isn't just a number, it's actually a URL that a person can click and go back to an individual's registry record. Entities, persistent identifiers can be used for people as ORCID. It can be used for organizations. It can be used for content. And what ORCID does, as you saw on the last slide, is it links a person identifier with identifiers for that same person and maybe other systems, but also identifiers for organizations and identifiers for content. So we are very much interested in how do we connect together a person, a researcher, with their works, with their affiliations, not just using metadata strings, but also making sure that, again, when a machine gets this piece of information, when a computer gets that, then that computer is then able to use processes to link and resolve to and understand, oh, this is this person's affiliation. Oh, this is this person's work. And not take the paper from ORCID, but use the information in ORCID to navigate back to a source document. So why do we care about identifiers? Again, they enable machine readability. They disambiguate and enforce uniqueness. So an individual with multiple name variations can have one identifier, and all of their works can be found easily. It enables linking and data integration, and most importantly, provides a basis for digital data governance. So ORCID not only lists identifiers together, it also provides provenance information. Who made the link? When was it made? What is the source of the information? All is part of ORCID. Data governance, very, very important. I mentioned this already when we're talking about digital communications. We do require information to be machine readable. And so here you see ORCID identifiers are displayed on Scopus. You can search Scopus using them. We have thousands of journals requesting ORCIDs during manuscript submission. We have organizations like the Swedish Research Council, the FCT in Portugal, a few other funders that are now requiring ORCID identifiers during grant submission. We have individuals registering for it. And we also have people talking about, oh my heavens, why do I have to fill in these forms? Why can't I just give you my ORCID identifier and then you use that in your system to pull in from that record? Okay, so this is you register, just so you get an example of how easy this is. It takes about 30 seconds to register, and this is the URL. If while you're listening to this, you want to register, please go ahead. You will see one of two different screens. If you are on a computer with a screen, a big size screen, you can register using this screen. You'll see that it asks for your name, first and last name, ask you for your email address, a password, and then you need to read through a very short little description here of default privacy, accepting the terms and conditions, and then hit the register button and you're done. That is how you register for an ORCID identifier. There is no fee required. An individual's organization does not need a member for them to register. This identifier belongs to the individual, and it moves with them as they move throughout their career. So from a tracking and evaluation perspective from the institution, this is a great service for you to be able to understand how your people are moving through their career and the different kinds of activities and affiliations they've had. From the individual's perspective, it means when they go to their next university or their next employment, they can use their ORCID record as a way of populating their profile at that institution without having to type things in again. This is another screen counter if you're registering on your phone. You can see that we do have responsive designs. You can use ORCID on any number of different devices. As I mentioned, this is free to researchers. The individual owns the record, works on tablets and phones. And the other piece here is that ORCID is available in multiple languages. And there's a couple other tweets here talking about how you use it. And here's Andy Mabbitt talking about using the ORCID identifier when a person submits thesis. So there's a number of universities that are really, really encouraging graduate students to submit their thesis with their identifier. They're actually requiring this. So then what ORCID does is it stores the link between the person, their thesis, the DOI, their thesis, and the unique identifier for the organization. And that becomes a piece of information stored there that other people can look at. For example, when the scholar moves from one university to another, in addition to having a paper record of their thesis and their graduation, they also have this electronic record that has validations in it. I'll turn off my webcam. Let's see here. Okay, so in addition to registering, we do encourage individuals to also use the free tools on the ORCID site to connect your ORCID identifier to name variations, so you can list as many as you have and associate them with your ORCID record. And once you do that, you can then associate your ORCID record with where you got your degrees, your degree granting affiliations, as well as your current employment. We do have a type ahead, so you can see here when I was typing in Stellenbosch, you can see the different variations of Stellenbosch that you can add into your record. And also, all of these are backed up by a unique identifier. So we're not trying to propagate, we are trying to propagate the, I guess, a consistent use of organization identifiers and organization names. And this is something that we've been collaborating with Ringgold and ISNI on. I'm more than happy to collaborate with organizations to make sure that your listing is appropriate. In addition to linking to affiliations, we also encourage individuals to link to their current funding and their works, data sets, books, journal articles, all of these. We do have tools in the ORCID registry to allow them to link to their existing works, in addition to encouraging individuals to use this identifier when they publish. Okay? Okay, so how is ORCID doing? We launched the registry just under 2 years ago, and we're on track to reaching 1 million identifiers issued by our 2-year anniversary. Internet integration and use is international, so you can see our member organizations represent every sector of the research community, with most of our members, or I guess the largest segment of our members, coming from universities and research organizations, but also a substantial part from publishing. We also have research funders, professional associations, and repositories involved with ORCID. Over 150 members. This is growing, and our members are from all over the world. And here you can see most of the people who come to ORCID and register are coming because they've encountered it during an integration that one of these members have done. That's dark blue on the bottom. Individuals coming directly to the website is that middle section, and the orange at the top represents those individuals whose employing organization has created a record for them. So these are universities creating records for faculty, staff, and students. I see a question here. Yes, we will be remaining nonprofit and open. This is actually part of our bylaws that ORCID is a nonprofit organization. We are an independent organization, and our bylaws very specifically state that that we cannot be sold to a for-profit company. So yes, we will remain nonprofit and open. There were 2 slides that got skipped over before. Sorry about that. We do have open source code available on a GitHub repository. We do encourage third parties to develop code using that or to contribute code to the ORCID code base. We provide a public data file once a year, so all of the data that an individual marks as public is published on an and that public data is using public API. We also have member APIs that provide additional functionality to enable member organizations to write into ORCID records to validate information in ORCID records and to receive as they happen notifications when ORCID records that you're interested in are updated. So that really helps repositories keep their records up to date. So here we see registry and use around the world, and we also have, I blew up what's happening here in terms of use in Africa. I listed the top 15 cities in African countries by usage, and we have, I mentioned here also that traffic to the ORCID registry from African countries currently represents about 3% of the total usage, with over 160,000 unique sessions. Okay. Okay, am I able to download an analysis of my members? Yeah, so what we have with ORCID is, because of privacy issues, we've been trying to be very responsive to concerns, both in terms of regulations in different countries, as well as in concerns by individuals. So one of our privacy policies is we will not release information about usage by individuals. We can release aggregate usage information. So what we can do is, in terms of members, not users, we can and do for premium members provide monthly reports for how their people are using their specific integration. So if you do sign up as a premium member, that is a report that you would get on a regular basis. So you would get to see how many people are logging in, how many people complete the login and registration process, and things like that. And I see there's another question over here. Are you able to see the research fields? Right. So here's another thing with ORCID. Again, we really try to use and perpetuate standards. Right now, there is no international standard for research fields. If you know of one, please tell me. So when somebody lists a research field, it's certainly possible to do in an ORCID record. It is not a standard list. And so being able to do an analysis by research fields right now is just not, it's not really possible. That said, we do know we have broad uptake across disciplines. We have journals for any number of different disciplines participating with ORCID, everything from science, technology, and medicine to, we have physics, we have math, we have the Modern Language Association, the Social Sciences Research Network is just about to launch integration. So it's broad participation across disciplines, just like we have participation across countries. Okay, let me move to the next slide here. Okay, oh, here we go. This is all about ORCID. So this is what I just mentioned as in here, an independent nonprofit organization. Our business model is that we are supported through member fees. We're not yet, we are not yet at the point of financial sustainability. We are working towards that. So we are essentially a startup organization. Our business model and has us reaching independence or sustainability, pardon me, in about 2016, so in about 2 years. And we're moving towards fairly well. This is how we deal with data governance. So we are committed to maintaining the persistence of the registry and the data in our charge. We are governed by an elected board of directors. It is majority nonprofit according to our bylaws. And this is drawn from our member organizations. And if you're interested in our governance, this is a link that goes back to our website, and you can see our bylaws, incorporation papers, annual reports, everything posted online. In addition to having a board that's drawn from member organizations, we are community driven, so anyone is welcome to participate in steering and working groups, and we also have an ambassadors program. And finally, staff, ORCID operations are managed by a full-time staff, so if you call us, we will answer the phone. Okay, we have different ways to join. So individual organizations, we also have consortium memberships. So local consortium, which would be a group of organizations in a particular region, and we also have national consortium membership possibilities. And any of these I can talk about in more detail. All right, so what I want to do now in this part of the presentation is to talk about who is integrating. So what are publishers doing, funders doing, etc., and provide some specific examples of what's happening. Okay, this is not quite showing up. This. Okay, so what you can see here is there's kind of two ways of thinking about ORCID. One is from the perspective of a member organization, an integrator. And what we are really encouraging is that when you start to use ORCID is that you integrate the data fields for ORCID identifiers into your system to collect these during transactions. So for example, when somebody comes to log into the library, that you would ask them for their ORCID identifier as a part of that transaction. And then you can, using our authenticated methods, which I'll show you in a second, don't ask them ever to type it in, have them log into their account and use our APIs to grab that identifier. And then also to incorporate identifiers if you're a publisher or you're otherwise putting information out about an individual, let's say on their university profile, to include that identifier in those different ways that you are putting public information about people. Again, that helps people when they're doing carrying out a search on the internet. If they're searching by an ORCID identifier, they can find all of these different pieces of information very, very easily. From the researcher perspective, they have two things. One is to register. It's very simple, as I showed. And then second is to use it. Use that identifier when you're submitting papers, applying for grants, deposits, data sets. And universities and libraries can help us with this too. Get this message out that they should register and use that identifier. See if it's going to go to the next slide. Okay, so here's some information on the APIs. We have a public API that allows individuals using to access data as public by the individual. It only allows read access into a record. The public API, we're just about to release an updated version of this that would support authentication. So it would allow you to use our processes to ensure that the person that you're working with that's interacting with the system is associated with this specific identifier. We also have member APIs that allow you to read a record and not just the public data, but it may not be marked as public by the individual, but they may want to share only with selected trusted organizations. It allows you to edit records and to append information to a record. And if you're an employer, you may also create records on behalf of your employees. We do provide a free sandbox environment and technical support to walk you through integration, understand and walk you through different use cases. We provide code samples, a lot of support, documentation to help you work through this process. And I provide here a link to our introductory documentation, which is an introduction to our APIs and how to use them, and directs you to how to register for the sandbox environment. Okay, this is just two really quick slides about how the APIs work. So for example, a member would ask for permissions from a scholar. So let's say an individual, I'm just going to take you through the use case everyone's most familiar with. When somebody comes to the manuscript submission system, is about to submit their manuscript, a publisher then asks them, please include your ORCID identifier here. Click on this link. That will take through a process where the member will ask them, is it okay for us to read information from your record and write information into your record? There's a very explicit ask of the researcher during this process. The scholar will then look at that and decide if they want to establish the trust relationship, click on an authorize button. Then this institution or this member becomes trusted and may add activities and receive record updates. Okay, so this is the first case study for using the APIs. The second case study takes you through one more, which is where an institution is creating an identifier. So here, you have an institution creating an identifier for an employee. The scholar claiming the identifier, setting privacy levels, and establishing a trust relationship with the university. And then that, with the employer. And then that allows the institution, the trusted organization, to continue to add information to the record and to read anything that's added to the record. Okay? So those are two case studies for using the APIs. How are different sectors of the community using this? So here we have publishers. You can see here in the open biology paper in the middle. At the bottom, this is an identifier that has been added into the published version of this paper. Okay, so you can see author, and then you can see their ORCID identifier. You can see, I mentioned this earlier, that Scopus is displaying the ORCID identifier on the author profile page. And you see that publishers not only are requesting IDs at the time of submission, they're embedding it in the article, both in print and online. They are submitting these identifiers to Crossref, and indexes are supporting ORCID both by indexing and supporting search. All disciplines are represented in this process. Now, the next one we have here is review. A lot of people think only of authors, but reviewers provide a huge service to the community to ensure the quality of publications. We have been working with CASRA and other organizations in this space to figure out how would one actually cite a review activity. What would that look like for a double-blind review? What would that look like for a fully public review? So what are those data fields? What is the metadata that we would want to use to describe review, and how can we accommodate those multiple use cases? We can see here Faculty of 1000 is soon going to be posting an integration that allows them to acknowledge peer reviewers on their platform. We have organizations like Publons using ORCID identifiers for signing into their service for peer review. We have Science Open is currently using ORCID as a way to qualify their reviewers. Folks who have an ORCID record with at least, I think it's one publication, are qualified as reviewers. If they have 5, they qualify as expert reviewers on that platform, as a really good way of showing, and the importance and value of having information linked to your ORCID identifier and how that enables your scholarship. In addition to search, we have integration into other sectors of the community. So here we have a slide on funding policy. We have funders like the Swedish Research Council that are going to be making ORCID collection mandatory in their new application system. This is coming next spring. We have the FCT which is the funder in Portugal, and we also have a foundation called Autism Speaks here in the U.S. that are also requiring ORCID identifiers from their grantees during manuscript submission. I'll talk a bit more about what's happening in Portugal. You can see that the ERC has started to ask for ORCIDs when their grantees are submitting. The National Institutes of Health here in the United States has integrated ORCID into their Science CV Commons CV platform. And also we have the policy recommendations for both the National Institutes of Health and the European Commission saying that, look, we have got to start using uniquely identifiable, attributable, and resolvable identifiers for our grantees. It's the only way. Now here's a slide talking a little bit more about what was going on in Portugal. So this isn't just about integrating ORCID identifiers into grant applications. It's really thinking about ORCID and identifiers for people as a component of a nationwide ecosystem for their current research information. And they want to enable interoperability among their index publications repository, their CV system, and their open access repository. And as you can see in this diagram, they see ORCID as a key to enabling that. What they did was last fall in November, a little over a year ago, they put out a notice to their grantees that they were going to be requiring ORCID by all people who would like to continue receiving funding from FCT. Provided very specific guidance on how to register and how to link that record to their existing publications and how to link that record to their current employer. Within 3 weeks, 14,000 people had registered. And this is a very smooth process that involved just a little bit of work and oversight on the part of ORCID. And in this case, they were using Scopus, but you don't have to just use one tool to encourage people to register. So 14,000 people on 3 weeks. In the next slide, what we have is a description of what's happening in professional associations. Again, similar to FCT, they see ORCID identifiers as a way of linking and interoperating a number of different data systems that they have for publishing, for their membership, and their meetings. Right now, these are isolated data systems. Having an identifier for a person that's an author, for a member, and a meeting, they can now link these different systems together and understand when one person is an author, a member, and an abstract submitter at meetings. So this was the Association for the American Geophysical Union. The Society for Neuroscience is also working on a similar scheme, and other organizations like IEEE are interested in components of this, publishing and meetings, for example. So this is moving forward in the association environment. Now next, I know we're running a little slow on time here. Repositories, a number of repositories have been working to integrate ORCID. So we have data sites. They have updated their metadata schema. So organizations that are data site members are asking for not just contributor names, but also the identifiers for those contributors. And that supports ORCID. We have other repositories like DSpace, HubZero, and HydroFedora that are supporting ORCID in their person schemas. We have repositories like ePrints that are supporting it in their publication repositories. Ethos is for Envirio, both repositories that receive information on theses that are integrating it into that workflow as well. Inspire at CERN for higher geophysics. And we also have repositories like Reactome, which is a repository that looks at specific biological processes using pathways, and they will then ask for, when somebody submits information to that repository, ask that individual or set of individuals for their ORCID identifier as well. And then moving from repositories into, well, here's a use case for DSpace. Their ORCID support is scheduled to come out actually before the end of 2014. Let's see, inclusion of ORCID in LC name, Library of Congress name authority records. Yes, yes, yes. You're asking there about the information on the ORCID and the library name authority records. So we have been doing a fair amount of work with ISNI, and we do have an OCLC representative on our board. OCLC is a member of ORCID. And actually was just talking with somebody from the Library of Congress a couple days ago. What happens here is the VIAF is very active in the library community. There is, as you know, the whole library authority process for trying to normalize library records across countries between the large country-based libraries. What we have, and the VIAF record actually feeds into ISNI. And ISNI is an international standard name identifier that works for any entity. So it can work for a person, a set of people. It can work for organizations as well. And so this VIAF name authority file then feeds into ISNI. And what we do is provide a facility to link an ISNI identifier to an ORCID identifier and to harvest information from the ISNI file, for example, the ISBN number, to then bring in the metadata from the ISBN registry and post that in the record. So we do interoperate with ISNI, and we are continuing to work with them to enhance that interoperability. Okay, I have a whole bunch of information on how universities are integrating, and I think what I'm going to do, since there is a lag with the slides, is just go through one or two of them and then open for questions if anyone has any other questions. Otherwise, I'll continue to go through these. So universities are doing a number of different things with ORCID records. They are getting ORCID identifiers and inserting it into their I guess you could say their identity management systems or their LDAP systems. They are getting to update their CRIS system or update a repository. They're enabling import from a university system into an ORCID record to help people get started so that they don't go through this process of having to link their ORCID record to their existing works. That helps jumpstart adoption sometimes at universities. They are linking ORCID identifiers to identifiers at the university system, for example, the faculty ID. This, in many cases, happens behind the university firewall, but still enables them then, like the association, to link together multiple person records at the university, and it's been incredibly helpful for a number of universities. And they also use this to create an identifier for faculty, staff, and students, and then use a number of these processes to pre-populate that record with affiliation information, for example. So it's really helpful for an individual to have a record that also has validated affiliation information in it. Okay, this is probably the best slide to show for universities, where we have a quote from a person at the University of Oxford. This is an ORCID member. They're also participating in a JISC ORCID pilot project in the UK, and they're having a meeting at the same time as this one to talk about how JISC is supporting nationwide adoption, or at least a test of adoption, pilot of adoption, of ORCID across a number of different universities. So Oxford is participating in that project, and they say here is the big one here is, they want to make sure that their institutional systems and publisher systems, all of these already have information in them. We shouldn't have to ask researchers to enter that again and again and again into multiple systems. How do we ensure that the way that we organize and collect information can enable machine processes when it's already in the database to move seamlessly between these systems, and to allow the researchers control over what information is going to be shown about them. So they want to reuse already available information, input once, use often. And I think that comes up with this really nice interchain, again on Twitter, between Smith and Terry Wheeler, where Alex is talking about, oh my gosh, it's hour number 2 of updating my publications in this Common CD platform just to see if they were published in Referee. Oh my heavens, why is this taking me this long? And I've had people tell me they've spent 3 days on a promotion and tenure case where they're just using most of that time to find, their publications, identify for those publications, find their meeting abstracts, and all the other things that they've been doing. Now, if they use their ORCID ID, all they really have to do for most of that P&T case would be insert their ID, have their home system pull information from the ORCID record to populate that, and then they could focus on writing the narrative along with that promotion and tenure case, and instead of spending so much time doing all the data collection. And you heard Terry Wheeler talking about, meanwhile, in an alternate universe, another you just typed in his ORCID, linked it all up for a run or to dinner, depending on what you like to do. So this is really what universities are trying to do. I am going to probably stop there and ask for questions. And if we have a little bit more time, I'm happy to go through. I have a number of other slides in this deck that talk about what specific universities are doing. So you can let me know if you'd rather stop for questions or if you'd like me to go through a couple more of these use cases. Okay, seeing no further questions, I'll go ahead and plug away. If you would like me to stop at any time and through Q&A, please just put that into, here we go, Kat, can't see it. Okay, thanks, Liana. Here, let me go through a couple more slides here. So here we have a case study. This is Chalmers University in Sweden. What they've done is create a web page, right, that they can direct people to during any number of different processes at the university. You can either come and register for your ORCID identifier or connect the university to your existing ORCID record. This is it really, really easy. They include on this page information ORCID is, if you need help, why Chalmers is this. But any system that they then want to connect up to ORCID, they can just direct people to this page. It's very, very straightforward, and a number of universities are using this particular model. On the next page, what you see is a diagram of all the things that ORCID sees, that Chalmers sees ORCID helping them with. So what they're doing currently, getting into CRIS, but also as we talked about Prisma, there's SweetCRIS, there's Quartus, the funding information, and FundDraft. All of these things that ORCID and the APIs we have can help enable in terms of their information management at Chalmers. Now the next slide is another university. This is the University of Colorado at Boulder that created over 3,000 records for their faculty in July of this year. And again, another really fun integration here where you have ORCID and the different things this enables them across the university in terms of data management. On the next slide, what I wanted to show was things that UC Boulder found as they were doing their implementation. So as it says here, they were originally concerned with name disambiguation, but they also found that there was a potential to use ORCID to link to other research identifiers to find data about works other than publications, to support information about graduate student employment and success after they had departed the university, and also maybe even more important, it broadened the campus conversation about the impact of research and creative work, particularly for the arts and humanities faculty. And that has been incredibly valuable for the folks at the University of Colorado. Now there's another set of universities in here. We have here the University of Michigan, and they're really working on ORCID and using it in institutional access management. And some of the things they're talking about, again, is this LDAP system, also integrating ORCID into their sponsored program grant system requirements, into their researcher profiles, integrating it into their research data repository, and also into their medical school CE system. But once they get that ORCID field in their LDAP system, that then enables connection of the ORCID identifier through all of these other systems that an individual has to log into. This is another case study. This here is Texas A&M, and what they did was really focus on researcher identifiers for their graduate students. They created over 10,000 records for their graduate students earlier this year. And and mandated the use of ORCID when a graduate student submits their thesis. This has been a huge effort on their part in terms of communications, and through them, ORCID has learned a lot about how we support universities and how we support this outreach effort. So Texas A&M has just been a very wonderful use case. The next slide shows they created this great little Monopoly game about how do we, where high touch meets high tech. The different things that they learned about how to do outreach. It's a little humorous, but also to the part that any university creating records on behalf of their faculty or staff is technical, but more importantly, there's an amount of engagement with the faculty and students is required. The students and staff and faculty need to understand what ORCID is. They need to understand why they should be engaged in the process, and it should add the very minimum of work to that group, that individual, for them to engage with the process. It needs to be a touch over and over again to make sure that they move forward with it. Okay, a couple more slides. The next set of slides here should be Oxford. And so here they had to manage research outputs, lots and lots of papers, over 12,000 peer-reviewed articles per year, and also an institution that's highly devolved. So it's not as if the administration can say, you do this. It's just not the way Oxford works. So as I mentioned, the JISC ARMA pilot project, and they're looking at a lightweight model that supports the control and ownership of information by researchers. Okay, so the next slide shows how they're doing this. They have created an ORCID assignment and linking process where the user logs into Oxford using single sign-on, and then Oxford will request a new ORCID. ORCID button, right? So it's similar this way. And then when they go through this process, the first and last name and the email and the University of Oxford name and identifier are posted into the registration and into that ORCID record. So they create the ID, the individual then claims this, says, yes, that's me, the person's associated with the ID, and then back to their university system. So they've now created this very, very lightweight process for people logging in and associating themselves with ORCID and with Oxford at the same time. Very straightforward, very easy. Two more slides. And then we also have support by a number of different systems. So in addition, in publishing, a number of the manuscript submission systems support ORCID. I mentioned the support by repositories. We also have support in a number of different CRIS systems that have integrated ORCID, including Vivo, the Converis system, Symplectic Elements, and Pure. And as I mentioned here, the support for ORCID, DSpace profiles, and PeopleSoft, among others. So it makes it a lot easier for university to contemplate moving forward, because it's not so much on the technical side of doing a whole lot of work. It's really which vendors do they support ORCID? Can we encourage them to support ORCID? And then how do we interact with our university community to encourage adoption? So that's all for my presentation today. And this is my last slide that has, if I get there, more information about ORCID. Here's our website, information on membership on this page. We have a knowledge base with public documentation about how to use ORCID APIs. We have a blog and Twitter feed. You can write an email to me, please. I'm happy to answer questions. And we also have a Cafe Press site, so after you register, you can get your own mug or a shirt that has your own personalized ORCID identifier on it. So that's it for my presentation. It looks like we have about 3 minutes left. I'm happy to answer any other questions, either now or after this. You have my email as I show here on the slide. So thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to present to the Vyasa Gila group, and I look forward to working with you. Oh, ambassadors, yes. So we do have an ambassadors program. There are over 80 people that participate in this program, and the ambassadors need to, we're still trying to figure out if we want more at this point. 80 people is a lot of people managed. What we do is provide an opportunity for individuals to interact across countries and across sectors to share what they're doing. They help us reach into and understand specific communities, specific community needs. The ambassadors also sometimes help us test messaging or test specific features of the ORCID interface. Some of our ambassadors also help us with translations or quality assurance on our translations. So what is required or what is expected is really what you can contribute as an ambassador, but there is an application process, and there is, if you go to our website and search up ORCID ambassadors, there's more information about the program there. Instead of another ID like research ID. Yes, so the big difference between ORCID and every other researcher identifier out there is that ORCID is actually embedded in the document, so you don't have to go update your record all the time. What individuals can do if they already have a researcher ID account is to link their ORCID identifier with their researcher ID account. This allows them to put their ORCID ID into the Web of Science, enables that discoverability component, but it also means that as they use their ORCID ID and as they publish or upload data sets, they can actually then resynchronize their researcher ID record with ORCID and very easily keep that researcher ID profile up to date. Yes, what I can do is I can post the slides on SlideShare, and I will send the link back to, so that she can distribute it to folks.
Thank you, Laurel, for... Okay, let me just take this opportunity and thank you, Laurel, for this informative presentation. We're definitely going to be in touch, and I think everybody will agree that this has been very, very informative. And also to thank our attendees for taking part on this. And let me just also assure you that there's still going to be more webinars, but you will agree that this has been very, very informative, especially for South African librarians. And it's something that we need to just promote. And maybe we need to do a follow-up and just see how we start just promoting it even within our institutions. Thank you.
Great.
And thank you all. This has been great.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to, there's somebody asking about what publishers want to do, and we are working on updating our documentation on the website. So you can come to ORCID, look up ORCID Publishers. There's a big button on the top of the website, and it'll actually provide a number of different resources to you to understand how, as a publisher, that you can integrate ORCID into processes. And I'm happy to follow up with you. Just send me an email, and I'm happy to send you some specific links for that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right.